Hi, this is Mercedes Byrne-Klug with the University of Iowa School of Social Work, and I'm very privileged to have a conversation this morning with Mr. Simon Estes. So thank you so much for joining us and for engaging in this conversation. How are you today?
I feel wonderful for an advanced citizen.
Well, great.
Chronologically speaking, I'm an advanced citizen because I'm a little bit over 82 years of age,
Oh my
and I
goodness.
really had and am still having a blessed life.
Wonderful. Well, that's kind of the theme of our conversation is going to be about your blessed life. And
Yes,
I was wondering if you would start out by telling us a little bit about where you were born.
right. I was born in a little town called Centerville, Iowa, which is kind of in southern central Iowa. We were 11 miles north of the Missouri border. And I was born in a little house that is still standing in Centerville, 27 feet by 25 feet. A family of six were
Oh, wow.
living in that little house. No running water, no electricity, no indoor toilet facilities. My grandfather was a slave, and he was sold for $500 in 1837. That's when he was born. And 5 years later, he was sold for $500. And the slaves in those days they paid $100 for each year of age. And so when my grandfather was sold, he was 5 years of age, and he was big and strong,
Oh,
so they paid a lot of money for him. We were very poor, economically speaking, but we were really rich in our faith in God and going to church and reading the Bible and seeking justice. Centerville was no different from any other little town in Iowa 82 years ago. We were called colored people, and we were not allowed to eat in certain restaurants. We couldn't swim in the swimming pool with white people. Eventually, they would let us swim on Saturday from 9 o'clock until 11 o'clock. And then we had to get out of the water, and we put more disinfectant in the water. We were not allowed to sit downstairs in the movie theater with white people. And I was the first person to integrate the movie theater, the Majestic Theater in Centerville, with three of my white not college, but high school friends. And it's a long story, but I won't go over too much. But anyhow, I wasn't allowed to go to the movies because of the violence with Roy Rogers and his 6-shooter gun. My parents didn't want me going to the movies, or my sisters, and then somebody kissing somebody else who maybe wasn't their wife or husband. So they were forbidden. I grew up in a Second Baptist church, which was a very fundamental church. We had two Baptist churches in Centerville. The First Baptist Church, the white people went to that one. The Second Baptist Church, the colored people went. And I remember as a child, I was always dumbfounded. I wonder why we have two churches, and they're both called the same name, etc. There's only one God, but that's another very, very long story. But my parents taught my sisters and me never to hate white people. We were always taught to pray for them if they mistreated us. So my life was centered around church and education. I went to elementary school in Centerville, and the first time that it was mentioned to me about my skin color, that it registered, was in about the third grade. And I remember a girl named Linda Helm asked Gail Miller, we were all in third grade, she said, "I love Simon. Do you love Simon because he's colored?" And I remember Gail hesitated, and then she said, "Well, I love him too." Now, none of us knew anything about romantic love, but we all knew the meaning of love. I feel very blessed because I had two wonderful, loving Christian parents. My mother had an 11th grade education, so she was a great reader. She always regretted that she didn't graduate out of high school. But for a colored girl to even finish 11th grade, as I said, my mother was born in 1910, that was quite an achievement. And discrimination has been around in this country for 401 years. And we still have it, of course, and we'll talk about that later, but I would like to continue on just to say that my father worked menial jobs. I don't think he ever brought home a check for more than $18 a week for a family of 6. But we had a tremendous amount of love in our family. And my father always told me, and my mother, but my father always said, son, you must get an education. And my mother said yes. And so my oldest sister ended up, she was, as I said, I was a baby. I had 3 older sisters. My oldest sister graduated from Mercy Nursing School in Des Moines, and she was a registered nurse. And another sister, older, went to junior college in Centerville, Iowa. And I went 2 years to junior college, as we call it in those days. And from 1956 till 57, I just went 1 year. Then I transferred to the University of Iowa.
Oh.
I was there at the University of Iowa from 1957 until 1963. Charles Kellis, a teacher, came there in 1961 and heard me singing and said, you know, you have a voice to sing opera. Having come from Centerville, I said, what's opera? And so he played some recordings of some great famous opera singers for me. And after I listened to them, and he played one symphony recording, Rimsky-Korsakov, Scheherazade. And I said to Mr. Kellis, I like that stuff. I called it stuff. And here was opera. And so that's where, when I was introduced to opera, I had my degree from the University of Iowa. I started out in pre-med, and then I was interested in theology and sociology. But when Mr. Kellis came to Iowa, and I believe this with all of my heart, Charles Kellis was sent to the University of Iowa in Iowa City, Iowa, to discover Simon Estes, because I knew nothing about opera and classical music. So he worked with me for 2 years, and he said, he always called me Simone. He said, you need to go to an all-musical school. So he arranged an audition for me at the famous Juilliard School of Music in New York. I flew out there. I was so naive, I didn't have enough sense to even be nervous for Juilliard. As I said, he gave me voice lessons for 2 years at the university. I went to Juilliard and I auditioned, and I found out something much later after my audition. When I finished singing, they said, would you just wait out there in the hallway? And I said, okay. I went out there. Then they called me back in. And this will show you how naive I was. They said, well, we've decided we'd like to give you a scholarship to come to Juilliard. And I said, oh, thank you. Just like that. And they probably thought I was some kind of a nut because I should have been jumping up and down. But I didn't realize the magnitude of Juilliard School of Music. And so I was at Juilliard for 2 years. And then I had a chance to go to Europe. And that's when my opera career began. At the Deutsche Oper in West Berlin in 1965, I sang the High Priest, Ramphus, in the opera Aida by Giuseppe Verdi. And that is all because I really believe this man discovered me. While I was at the University of Iowa, I wanted to sing in one of the big university choirs. And the director, I asked him if I could sing in the choir. He said, well, no, your voice isn't good enough. And he was the head of the voice department. So I said, well, could I take voice lessons with you? He said, no. He said, you have no talent. He said, I wouldn't waste my time with you. However, there's a young teacher coming here in the fall. Maybe he will take you. That was Mr. Kellis. And so that was a very interesting part of my life. And as I was at Juilliard, as I said, for 2 years, I had a chance to go to Germany and audition for a manager, which I did. And the manager liked my voice. I flew over in December 1964 to Dusseldorf, Germany, and sang an audition from this agent. And he said, could you just wait till after the first of the year? I want to send you to West Berlin. Of course, Berlin was divided because of the wall right after the first of the year, January 1965. So I stayed. I flew to, no, I didn't fly then. I took a train to West Berlin, auditioned for the Deutsche Oper, and they offered me a contract. I went back to Juilliard, all excited to say, they've given me a contract to sing the opera Aida in West Berlin at the Deutsche Oper, meaning German Opera House. And the dean of Juilliard School of Music said, well, Simon, you'll have to tell them no. He said, because if you don't finish Juilliard School of Music, you'll never have a career. Well, my heart just sank. I was so sad. So I went to Christopher West, who was the head of the opera theater within Juilliard, told him this story. He said, well, Simon, he was British, I can still remember. He said, you'll have to tell them no. He said, because if you don't finish Juilliard School of Music, you shall never have a career. But my heart sank again. And I don't remember if I prayed about it or not, but something said, go east, young man, go east. So I left Juilliard when I learned the music, made my debut April 19th, 1965. Now the Deutsche Oper in West Berlin is like our Metropolitan Opera House or Chicago or San Francisco. And in 1966, the State Department contacted me and said, we'd like you to represent the United States in the first vocal Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow. And so I said, okay, again, my usual, okay. To make a long story short, I went there and I got the bronze medal in 1966. This was 1966. President Johnson invited me to come to the White House and sing.
Oh my gosh.
Along with a couple of other female singers that won. And then my career just took off. I got with Columbia Artist Management, the same company that had Columbia Pictures at one point. My whole story is like a fairy tale because here this little skinny colored kid from Centerville has gone to West Berlin, sang in this opera. Then they offered me more roles. And in 1966, I win this competition, third prize. They also had an international competition in Munich, Germany in 65. I entered that in the fall and I got third prize there again. My whole life, I've never won first prize, but I've sung in 115 different opera houses. 115 different orchestras. I sung with 115 different orchestras all around the world. Australia, New Zealand, you name it, I have sung there, and 84 different opera houses. With opera, it enabled me to travel all around the world and to realize there's only one race, it's the human race. People are different colors, different shapes of their eyes because of climate, geography, and perhaps diet. And I realized we are all God's children. And this is all because of opera. And as you know, in opera, you have to sing. I sang and I've recorded in German, Italian, French, Spanish, Russian, and English, and Catalan, which is a dialect of Spanish in part of Spain.
So you had to learn those languages in order to sing in those languages. And what was the process to learn how to sing in Russian or Catalan?
Okay, I will tell you, I didn't know any languages at all. I learned a few arias from Mr. Kellis when I was studying in Italian. When I was even still at the University of Iowa, he taught me a couple of songs. And I didn't know until I went to Berlin that God had given me a talent not only to sing opera, but languages.
Oh,
when I went to Berlin, I didn't know how to speak German at all when I went over there in April of 1965. Verdi wrote Aida in Italian, but the people in those days would do it in the native country's language, so they performed it in German. I had memorized the role of the king because my audition, they told me to sing, I would sing the king in Aida. When I got there, they told me I had to sing the high priest, Ramphis, which is the biggest main bass role in this opera. And so I remember I called Mr. Kellis because I had the king all memorized when I arrived. He said, Simone, I don't understand. They said, you're supposed to sing the king. And now he said, well, I don't understand it. He said, but you can learn it. I learned, and this is the absolute truth, I learned the role of Ramphis, and that's a long, big main bass role in this opera, in about 9 days or so. Had no rehearsal with the orchestra. The conductor was Giuseppe Patane, he was an Italian conductor. The whole cast, I didn't even rehearse with him, not musically, not vocal, dramatically, not theatrically. They just told me, took me in a big room and said, well, this scene, you have to be over here, and Aida will be here, and the tenor named Barada will be over here, etc. And the choir is back there. This is the honest truth. Knowing what I know now, I would not have been able to do that because I would have been a nervous wreck. But again, my naivety played a role in this. I hadn't learned fear. I was started singing in Italian, in French. When I went to the Moscow Tchaikovsky competition, we had to sing certain repertoire in Russian. And the State Department, because they're the ones that invited me to represent the United States, and they said they would send, because I was now singing and living in Germany, they said, we'll send you money to study Russian. They never sent the money. But I had all of the rest of the repertoire, and something just told me to go anyhow. I flew from East Berlin. Berlin was divided in that time with the wall. I just happened to be sitting next to a Russian actress who was in East Berlin. And so she was sitting next to me. By that time, I spoke a little German. She said, why are you going to Moscow? I said, I'm going to sing in the Tchaikovsky vocal competition. And her eyes lit up because Tchaikovsky is one of the greatest composers of Russian. And I had this book of Russian songs, but in Cyrillic, not even in English, not even in our alphabet. And I asked her, could she introduce me to a famous Tchaikovsky song on the airplane? It took a little over 3 hours to fly from East Berlin to Moscow. She taught me a song, Ni slova, o drug mój, which means not a word, oh my friend. She taught me this song phonetically from East Berlin to Moscow. Because in the first round of the competition, you only had to sing one song in Russian. Then I sang other songs in Italian, English, and German. Wow. So I had Irina Zorina, was a pianist, a Russian lady, and she played for me. And she was all excited because I advanced to the second round. She said, what sing you Russian round two? And I hem-hawed around. I said, well, and I said, I don't know anything else. Well, her face just went whiter than everything. She said, impossible to learn 3 Russian songs in 2 days for round 2. No, we work very hard, we do it. I learned it. And
oh my gosh.
And I ended up winning the bronze medal, 3rd place in Moscow. And God gave me a talent for languages. So I've sung in all those languages, speak German fluently, and I've sung 102 roles in opera in those languages. Almost like 102. So that's why I give God the credit for giving me a talent for languages, for memorization. I didn't know I had a talent to memorize. And see, this is why I believe my whole life has been led by God, because I didn't study any of this in Centerville. And so I just was able to learn these languages and to memorize. I have actually learned a whole opera in 4 days. From memory, I did it. Sang the title of Nabucco, Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible, that story, in Cape Town, South Africa. And so I give God all of the praise and glory. So that's kind of like my opera career.
That's an amazing career. And that's an amazing facility with language and then just the ability to remain calm while you're singing in a different language under pressure. I mean, that says a lot about your temperament and your ability to concentrate and your determination. My goodness.
Well,
fantastic.
Education was always important because my father, as I said, couldn't read or write, and my mother had an 11th grade education. All of us graduated out of high school, and 2 of us graduated from college, university. And the Bible even speaks of education. In the book of Proverbs, it says to get knowledge and get understanding. Well, knowledge is education. I have said, I do lectures also all around the world. And I tell people the highest paid people, we don't have our priorities right. Our highest paid people should be educators, nurses, and doctors and ministers. And those are the people that I admired and that I looked up to in Centerville, Iowa, with those 4 different professions.
Well, I kind of have to agree with that.
Good.
But having been all over the world and sang all over the world and met people all over the world, I'm interested in hearing about your experience as a Black man in other countries and in this country, your experience with acceptance and your experience with racism.
Yes, racism was there when I grew up in Centerville. I told you just 2 incidents, but now that I'm over 82 years of age, and I've been all around the world, all over Scandinavia, Sweden, Norway, I've sung for the Nobel Prize Committee. I sang for Nelson Mandela. I sang for, as I said, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. All of this has been a gift and an education that I have experienced having been all around the world. But because my skin color, I can't change my skin color, nor do I want to. But a lot of people with different nationalities, they would change their names. For example, Michael Douglas, you know, the famous actor,
Yeah.
he's Jewish. A lot of people didn't know that. Richard Tucker, whose name is Ricardo Tucker Taubman, I think, in Hebrew, but he was Jewish. But I couldn't change them. There were a lot of opera houses, and especially in my own country, they wouldn't let me sing for many, many years because of my skin color. And I remember 1971, I was living in New York, and I had already sung in London and Paris and Rome and Switzerland. I called my mother in tears, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I was crying. I said, you know, Mother, I've sung in so many opera houses in Europe, but they won't let me sing in some of the opera houses in my own country. My mother said, well, son, remember what I taught you when you were a little boy. If you had problems, you get down on your knees and you pray. And as a result, I've sung in all the major opera houses in the United States. But discrimination is a real blemish still on humanity and on the United States. Here we are, 2020, and we still have discrimination. Black people make 56 cents on the dollar compared to a white person. A Black woman earns 51 cents on the dollar to a white woman doing the same thing. There is still a lot of discrimination that goes on. I think one of the reasons people just don't have enough love in their hearts. And I think it needs to be taught in schools at a young age. Children need to be taught that there's one race, and we're just different colors or having different shapes of eyes for the various reasons I said before: climate, geography, maybe diet. And our bodies have adapted. This is a long story, but our bodies has made an adjustment to different climates. That's why some people have different shape of eyes and different skin color. It's all because of climate. And I think that God made us to become different colors, to test the quality of our characters. Can we love someone if they look different from the way we look? I personally have had experiences with policemen. I was driving 2 years ago out to visit my daughter and my 3 grandsons in New York. And I was in the traffic flow on the interstate in Ohio. And I remember there was a white car in front of me and another car in front of that. And behind me, there was a red car. It was a red Taurus Ford. The white car in front of me was a Chevrolet SUV. And I came up over just a little crest, and there was a highway patrolman with a radar gun. Keep in mind now, I was in the middle of 2 cars ahead of me, 2 cars behind me. And they had white people, and the white car was a white lady. And I was talking with my wife on the telephone at the same time. And I said to my wife, I saw the patrolman get in his car. I said, I wonder if he's going to stop me. Sure enough, he stopped me. Now, this is 2 years ago. And I had both hands on the steering wheel. And I said to the patrolman, I said, officer, please do not shoot me. I said, please don't shoot me. And he said, I'm not going to shoot you. Give me your driver's license. I said, well, officer, I have to take my left hand off of the steering wheel, and I have to reach back to get my driver's license in my wallet. I said, so please don't shoot me. He said, I'm not going to shoot you, just get it. I said, well, I'm going to move very, very slowly. And so I reached back really slowly to get my wallet. I got it out. And at that time I was shaking. I was absolutely shaking. And I said, I'm having trouble getting my license out because I'm nervous. So I gave him my license. He went back to his patrol car. Then he came back after 5 minutes or so and said to me, I asked him, I said, officer, why did you stop me? He said, because you were speeding. I said, but I was just following the flow of traffic. I said, that's all I was doing. And I said, there was a white SUV Chevrolet in front of me, and there was a red Taurus Ford in back of me. He said, oh no. He said, I saw. He said, you're right, I saw that. He said, I said, in fact, the Chevrolet was a Chevrolet Equinox. He even saw the model of that Chevrolet SUV. I didn't even know what an Equinox was until after he told me. And so I said, well, then why did you stop me? He said, well, all three of you were speeding, and I decided I wanted to stop you. And he said, and furthermore, I want to tell you something. He said, if you had had your hands raised and you started to lower your hands, he said, I would shoot you. He said that to me. I cannot tell you how scared I was. I was in Canada preparing to sing a concert the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I had the pleasure and the honor of having heard Martin Luther King speak while he was still alive. And I remember Walter Cronkite came on the television. I was getting ready to sing my concert. I told him, I said, Martin Luther King has been assassinated. My heart just sank. Because I knew his family later on in life. I was in there, someone knew Coretta and their children, all of them. I told the audience that night, I said, I'm going to have to change some of my songs because I can't sing anything happy because what had happened. And they had a reception for me. It was in Hamilton, Barrie, Ontario, Canada. And they said to me, why don't you move to Canada? They said, we wouldn't treat you this way. I said, well, you know, I'm going to stay in the United States, continue to fight for our rights in my own country. I will not give up my citizenship. But unfortunately, it still does exist. And I hope the day will come when we will have, you know, I've given lectures in newspapers all around the world. And I've said for probably the last 30 years, I've been singing almost 60 years. I've been, I said, I'll be so grateful that it'll probably not happen in my lifetime, that I can have an interview and talk about my profession and opera, my travels, and not just racism. But it has to be addressed. And I hope and pray what I try to do constantly. I talk to young Black students. I've been a professor at Boston University. I've lectured at Harvard University, Duke University, University of Wisconsin, Moscow Conservatory. I've done lectures all over the world. And I tell the Black kids here, students, I say, if you get stopped by policemen, just keep your hands on the steering wheel. And I said, if you're really nervous, tell them you're not going to remove your hands because you're afraid you'll get shot. And they can just call up another police car. Because I had an experience in 1971 in Chicago. I was singing with the Chicago Lyric Opera in the opera Macbeth. And someone had told me, and I've been singing professionally at that time for 6 years. I started in 65, this was 71. They said you can buy a Mercedes-Benz and pick it up at the factory in Germany and save a lot of money. And they told me how to do it. And so I bought a Mercedes-Benz, a 280 SE at the factory in Sindelfingen, which is a suburb of Stuttgart, Germany. Picked it up at the factory. And it was a really wonderful experience. In those days, it only cost $7,800, if you can imagine. And so I bought that car and I drove it around Europe, had international license plates. I drove it all the way to London and Scotland because I was going to sing with the Scottish Opera. So then I took it to a boat, ship in Amsterdam, had the car shipped over to New York, picked it up in New York, drove it from New York. I called Iowa because I had my legal address was still in Iowa to get my registration. I tell you the story because I was on my way to rehearsal one morning and the policeman stopped me in Chicago. And I said, lower the window, Lord. He said, driver's license. I said, well, what's the matter, officer? He said, you shut up. I'll ask the questions. Give me your license. So I gave him my license. He looked at it. And I said, well, officer, why did you stop me? He said, because you don't have any license on this car. I said, what? And I went to open the door. He said, don't you open that door. You stay right where you are. I said, officer, I'm here singing with the Chicago Opera. And I just left my hotel. And I was driving. And I saw my license on the car when I got in. How could they have fallen off? He said, oh, you have plates on them, but they don't count here. I said, officer, which he didn't know. I said, I have international plates. Because he said, let me see the papers that you paid for this car. I said, well, I don't have those papers with me, officer. I explained it to him. I said, I was driving a Mercedes-Benz, and a black man, we were called Black in 71. I wasn't supposed to be there. He assumed I had stolen the car. And he asked me for the papers to prove that I'd paid for it. Who carries the papers around, the sales? And so he said, you stay exactly, don't you move. I sat there, he called another police car. He said, we will escort you down to the police station. You stay between us. They took me down to the police station, and I must admit I was scared. And I said, am I allowed to make a telephone call? You may make one call. So I called the Lyric Opera in Chicago, Illinois, spoke with the director. Her name is Carol Fox. She was head of the whole opera house there. I told her, she said, Simon, stay right where you are. I'm calling our lawyer right away. They called the lawyer. The lawyer called and said, we let that man out. They said, we're not going to let him leave unless he gives us $25. So the lawyer said, give him $25, Simon. I gave them $25. Now, I was in Chicago for 10 weeks. I was stopped 10 times by the Chicago police. They always thought I had stolen the car because I was a black man driving a Mercedes-Benz. And that's the honest truth. Not one time did I get a ticket or a citation. But they interrogated me, and I was able to explain it to them. But so I've experienced that myself, and I'm not happy about it. I'm not saying that all police are that way, but I think one of the problems are always saying, what can we do about the police situation? My theory, my idea is they need to have educations in college or university for at least 4 years in behavioral sciences, because they encounter so many different people and different colors and different nationalities, et cetera, et cetera. They don't have to have even 1 year of a college education. We know that education is vitally important in helping people to be able to reason in life and discuss things. And I think that would make a big difference if policemen all over the world, but especially I'm talking about the United States right now, I do believe they need to have a 4-year degree in education and have knowledge about human behavior. So I'm very sad at what's going on in this country. I'm sad that we have a leader of this country who is dividing people. I'm very sad about that. And I just hope that we'll get a new situation come November where we can learn to love one another and understand one another. I think children need to be educated starting in elementary school, that there are different types of human beings, different colors and different eye shapes. They need to be taught that in schools in a beautiful way. So that God did everything right. And he wanted us to be different. He could have made everybody one color, but he didn't. Because I still think he wants to test us. Can we love someone if they look different from the way we look? And so I think it's a tragedy that children are not being educated. When I grew up, the only person in any textbook that I knew about was George Washington Carver. And all it said is he was a man who did something with a peanut. But that man did over 400 discoveries, et cetera, et cetera. There's a building named after me at Iowa State University, this past March 4th. The whole music building, they named it after me. It's called the Simon Estes Music Hall. Right next to my hall is George Washington Carver Hall. But education, I think, is vitally important. And I do believe those of us who have religion or some sort of faith, that we need to, churches and ministers need to talk about the importance of telling people we are all God's children. We are all human beings. We can save each other's life if you need a kidney or if you need a transplant. But once we get beyond this epidermis, this outer layer of skin, or different shaped eyes, we're all the same. We're human beings. There's only one race, that's the human race. And so I have a very heavy heart. I'm not feeling sorry for myself. But my mother and father taught me, don't hate white people, just pray for them, son. And I hope the day will come when I get there. I was so proud when Barack Obama, I never dreamed that would happen in my lifetime. I really didn't. And most of us didn't. But I sang for him too. I've sung for 6 presidents of the United States, going clear back to Johnson.
Well, your singing has brought joy to so many people, and your sense of fairness and social justice and your articulation of it has also really reached out and convinced people that there is another way and a better way. And then you've also taken action yourself in starting some foundations.
Yes.
So would you just say a few words about the foundations that you've started?
The first one was the International Simon Estes International Foundation for Children in Zurich, Switzerland. I founded a foundation there to help save children who needed health concerns throughout Europe. And I raised a big concert. I did a big concert in Zurich, Switzerland. And one night we raised over $400,000. I gave it all to the Children's Hospital in Zurich, Switzerland, the Kinderspital, to help save children's lives. And then I have several foundations here in the United States, one at the University of Iowa State University. I'm a professor, as you know, at Iowa State, and also at DMAC College. I have a scholarship, both of those institutions, because I knew what it was like to really suffer without enough money when I was going to the University of Iowa. I think it's 10 or 11 honorary doctorate degrees. As I told you earlier, I've given lectures at Harvard and have a certificate from them, etc. And then my foundation gives scholarships. My wife and I have given from this. I have a Simon Estes Foundation here in Iowa. And I'll give you my address in case people want to get my autobiography. They can write in care of my foundation in CDs. And I'm using some of the CDs to raise money to raise children, save children's lives in Africa. I'll just quickly mention this. A number of years ago, I did a big several concerts here in Iowa, and I raised a total of $532,000. Gave it all to the United Nations Foundation to buy these nets for the children who were needlessly dying in Africa. As of 2013, there were 1 million children, little black children, dying in sub-Saharan Africa of malaria from a mosquito bite. All they needed was a $5 net under which to sleep, so the mosquitoes couldn't bite them. So I have an agreement with the United Nations Foundation. My wife and I flew out to Washington, D.C. to meet with the people of Nothing But Nets. Margaret Riley O'Donnell is the executive director of the Nothing But Nets department in the United Nations Foundation. And I have an agreement with them. So anyhow, I sang these concerts. Every penny I gave to the United Nations Foundation, Nothing But Nets, $532,000. I'm still raising money for the CDs that I'm going to be releasing in September. Another CD that's coming out with just hymns and gospels and Negro spirituals. I'm going to give some of the money to the Iowa Food Bank, give some money to still buy the nets in Africa with the United Nations Foundation. And what I want to do the rest of my life is to serve God, to serve the Lord, to be obedient to his commandments, and to serve other people, and especially children. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I will continue my relationship with the United Nations Foundation.
Well, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. And thank you so much for the time that you have given us today in talking with us and telling us about your life and your experiences and your hopes, because you are a very hopeful person. And
Yes.
that comes across, a very peaceful, hopeful person. And you're a wonderful example.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
feel very humbled to have spoken with you and very honored. And I wish you good health and good happiness, and take good care of my old alma mater, University of Iowa. And God bless you.
All right. Thank you.